everybody, and welcome to Secure Your Supplier Risk Management by Jeffrey Moore. Just a quick overview of me. I'm currently the Chief Product Security Officer at Dräger Medical, and I've spent over 20 years in both technical and leadership positions within security. And let's move on. So quickly to start off with, there's a couple of definitions about what we're going to talk about. Third party, based on what's out there, is actually a technical definition out there, which is an external organization which is providing services or products to your organization. And these are examples ranging from managed service provider, supply chains, cleaning companies. Right. The fourth party out there is actually a company that is connected to your third party that has a contract with them for some of the same services, as you can see, but also they may actually be working on your contract, right? So I just figured I would get that out there. So if anybody had any questions, they were pretty much insane. Up with a few statistics that I found out there. Some of these statistics came from UpGuard, and the other one came from a security scorecard presentation. As you can see, the third-party breach cost has increased by 370,000 to 4.2 million. And this is why we are having this presentation, because third-party risk management and vendor risk management is so important. Also, you need to monitor and mitigate the third-party risks and fourth-party risks. And we'll talk about fourth-party risks further down the line. Organizations that have put security automation technologies in place have actually further reduced the cost for experience a breach, whether it's a third-party breach or a internal breach, from 5.6 million to 2.6 million. 70% of breaches are caused by third parties, and you're seeing a lot more of this currently in the news. The cost per record due to a third-party breach is a lot more expensive than an internal breach at $231. And then, of course, if you have a breach that has a lot of other additional data that comes under GDPR, then you'll also have additional penalties for non-compliance. Over here, the Department of Justice, has about 90% of its anti-corruption are due to or involve third parties. And currently, we're seeing about 71% of companies fail to adequately manage their third-party risk. This will, I believe, over the next 5 years, drop down to about 35 to 40%. The CIA triad. The confidentiality, integrity, and availability triad has slowly started to break out. It's no longer a triad, because now you have to take into a lot of the requirements around security, compliance, regulatory, and then of course the way that the compliance impacts security can also impact your triad. The organization liability, distributed assets, and distributed resources has changed over the last few months massively, because now your assets and resources are a lot more distributed into the wild. And this also impacts your third parties, because they're also under the pandemic, under the same restrictions, and a lot of the people cannot go in the office. This, as you can see in the next slide, the compliance requirements are very important around a lot of the different industries we have out there. As if you're working in America with the government, you now have coming under the CMMC. You have the Massachusetts law and the CCPA from California, which is a derivative of the European GDPR law requirements. Now, depending on what industry you are, different compliance requirements will impact your liability and your compliance conformity. In some cases, HIPAA, working from home, your wife looking over your shoulder and seeing this, some documents relative to HIPAA has a bigger impact and are hard to mitigate right now. But this also goes for your third parties, because if they're doing something for you that is now outside of where you certified them, you actually have bigger and more impactful compliance issues that could come down the line. Now, the risk flows both ways, and as you look carefully here, as you outsource to your third party, whatever they have, their risk will flow up to you as well. And a lot of organizations and a lot of management believe that if you outsource to your third party, you're outsourcing a lot of the risk and issues. and most of them don't realize that you can never outsource the accountability. As an organization, you are accountable for your data, for your compliance, for your security, your reputation, and your strategy. Moving to a third party could be a strategic move, but there is also a strategic risk if that third party fails, that third party gets bought out, or the third party is hacked. Then the reputational risk from the third party hack will impact your organization. Of course, the operational risk is if they go down, it will impact your operational issues. The compliance risk is they have to maintain the same compliance requirements that you have to, depending on what your organization does. And then, of course, they need to have the same security posture as your security posture. It's not good practice to actually try and make your third party be more secure than you, because if you get hacked and it impacts them, it's always the other way around, right? Now, as we move to the cloud, third-party risk starts to slide up the scale, because here you have the shared accountability model, right? But the allure of the cloud is actually great. It's there's a lot of benefits from moving to the cloud and a lot of negatives, right? And a lot of the negatives around people not understanding how the cloud operates, but also if your third party is using the cloud, you need to do a lot of validation of what they're doing in the cloud to make sure that their configurations and their risk posture in the cloud is at the same level of yours. And a lot of this has an additional level of complexity because the underlying cloud infrastructures need to also be able to support your requirements. And most cases, the big three out there have that ability and have well documented to help you move towards GXP or HIPAA or PCI, but it's your job or your third party's job to actually get that compliant. Being Microsoft's Azure Cloud is HIPAA compliant, but you're actually the one that has to put the HIPAA compliant controls in place and validate them and continually monitor them, right? As the same as your third party. And this is where it comes down to the shared responsibility part, right? If you look carefully at the graphic on the side, right, there's a layer, it's a layered approach, right? And depending on what your third party is doing for you, or parts of these will belong to them, parts of these will belong to you, but whatever happens, right, there will be the total underlying part, which is provided by the cloud provider, which they normally have SOC 1, 2, and 3 compliance requirements, and they'll have the documentation to prove it. But as you go up that stack, your third party will have to make sure that they're done correctly and balanced correctly, right? And it gets harder and harder as you go through third parties to validate a lot of this stuff that's going on. And if there's a fourth party, you don't know about it, it could impact you further down the line, right? Now, let's talk about the attributes that organizations would need to create a successful TPRM program, which is a third-party risk management program, right? First off, shift away from that checking the box Excel spreadsheet that finance department started about 7-8 years ago, right? Look at having specialized functional departments that can work through this, check policies and procedures that actually enforce parts of the organization to do anything with a third party to make sure that they can actually do this. Make sure you get tools and systems to help manage your third party program, right? And then work continuously with security and legal to make sure that your third party is not being breached or shows up in somewhere else. In the past and in the future, procurement and vendor management has forced a lot of rules onto the business to help itself. But right now, this is where both vendor management, procurement, legal, and security need to work closely together. Also, get the right to audit in all your contracts. Have the ability to go into your third party to audit them, to validate that what they say is true. A lot of your third parties will look at pushing back or asking you to change some of the contractual data because they know the impact an audit can have to an organization. A couple of examples here is we've asked the right to audit with different companies and kind of the big names in the industry, and parts where they push back, we've even been offering, we know it will impact your business, we're willing to pay to come and audit you, right? It's better to have a safe set of information and a validated set of information. As some of you may know, Target a few years ago was hacked by a third party. The third party company was Dräger Medical Services. This company, honestly, was a company that they had brought in to check all their air cons and refrigerated services in the organization. And the company was targeted to get to Target, which they succeeded. There is a really good article in the CIO magazine called 11 Steps to Attack. I added the link here, which actually shows a lot of the common patterns that are used to have these third-party breaches that are out there. And this example was a very clear example of somebody using a company with lesser security practices, and it was more of a, shall we say, a technical company in the level of hardware technical than in software technical, so that they felt it was an easier target to get in. Here is the third party and fourth party issues. A company named ERT was attacked by ransomware, which impacted IQVIA, all right, which also impacted another big life science company that was doing research on COVID and a few other documents. The life sciences company didn't even know about the ERT company that was working with the other company. So they didn't have any contractual agreements or data to work with when this happened, right? And if you look at the headlines, it actually looks like that this was one company that was impacted when in fact it was a different company that was totally altogether. The question to a couple of my other colleagues out there is, did the big pharma that was there know that the third party had its third party, which is to them the fourth party? And a lot of the answers that come back around this that no, they didn't know about it. To have any good program in the organization, you're going to need tools, you're going to need processes, you're going to need even people, right? There are a lot of governance, risk, and compliance tools out there that offer third-party risk management modules. A lot of them are very good, don't get me wrong, but to be honest with you, a few of these don't actually have a very good connection to talk about fourth parties, right? And some of them have the ability to be edited or changed or modified to help you add some of your own internal processes. I would highly recommend that you put a process in there to say, will there be any third-party companies who are connected to you that will be working on our projects, right? And also have a line that says, do you do a good third-party risk management process? Also, look at continuous monitoring tooling for your organization. Things like Recorded Future, BitSight, Security Scorecard are good tools, have limitations and different issues, but you can monitor for their external facing technology, but at the same time, you can also, for them in the news, in the dark web, monitor and stuff like that. Look at federation services to make sure that you can actually turn off them straight away, that you have tooling that connects to their environments, that if they fire somebody, that person has no longer an account in your organization right away. You know, make sure that you have good collaboration tools between both organizations that have great logging to help you maintain a record of what goes on between both organizations. And last but not least, make sure you involve your legal team, right? When anything goes wrong, the legal team is going to have to work on a lot of the issues out there. At the same time, the contracts should be well written to protect both you, your organization, and at the same time, the organization that you're working with. To actually start a minimal effective third-party risk management program, and to be honest with you, I spent a lot of time trying to get this slide right, because I remember when I started mine about 9 years ago in Adidas, and we didn't do some of this stuff, and we didn't have the ability to do some of this stuff, and we did as best as we could. But you know, looking back, I realized there was a lot of stuff that I could have done up front. You know, before you get your contract, make sure you do your due diligence. You go through, have a very clear risk assessment process that you've agreed with between security, compliance, legal, and privacy. Right. Make sure you have standardized contract clauses that cover security and the risk positions of the organization. Right. In some cases, please validate that they have cyber insurance. Right? This is a huge plus point, but also protects you in the long run if something goes very bad. Right. Also, to your third party, also make sure that you have some contractual clauses for fourth party access, so that you know if somebody is going to try and come into your organization. Also, in some cases, I forgot to write this up here, is actually also have a point of where you want a lot of you, maybe your third parties, to work out of. If you're a very European-centric organization, you may not want them to use part of their organization in China or in another part of the world, right? So make sure. As for going, make sure you have a very formal onboarding process and oversight. Very clearly talk about what is done and what is not done, what is required and what is not required, right? Make sure there's visibility of all third-party contracts to the different parts of the organization, so that if they want to work with somebody, they don't go and restart, go for another company where it's possible to go for a company that's internal, that has already gone through this. And at the same time, less amount of third-party companies reduces your risk, right? And then set up some third-party monitoring and oversight in the organization. Make sure you have regular meetings with them, but also monitoring the internet, the dark web, about some of the stuff about that organization. And once you finish, right, make sure you have a very formal offboarding with a certification. You know, all data is returned and or is destroyed at the end of the contract. A lot of people forget about this, or contracts don't have this in. I'll be honest with you. Over the last year, I'd probably say about 60% of the contracts didn't have this part in there. And I'm hoping a lot of you guys get benefit out of this, because your data is your data, even though it's hosted somewhere else. And then also make sure there's an awareness and adoption program for the employees of both organizations, talking about what this company is doing for you and what's going on, right? It doesn't have to be a formal awareness program where you have a lot of red tape. Just make sure that both third-party employees and your employees know about what's going on, what's required from both organizations. After you've done a basic program like I taught before, and it's not as basic as it sounds, as you can guess, right? You know, you can work, and I've done this in my previous organization, to help strengthen the other organization you work with and help them increase their security program by providing them with documented security baselines that they have to adhere to. Define a very clear delineation between the responsibilities that they're supposed to take care of and you're supposed to take care of. You know, make sure they have a disaster recovery program. And you may notice I put this up there because there's several parts of the organization I've worked with in the past where things went wrong, and much to our big sadness, we lost a lot of data and part of a project that took us another year to get back to where it was. Have a very clear coordination between security, legal, procurement organizations, right, for both visibility and coverage of what's happening with this third-party risk management program. At least go once a year and review the processes, the procedures, what's required from all of these organizations to make sure that you can strengthen your program year to year. I should have added privacy in here. Privacy is key to any third-party risk management program, and we should probably, in a later date, have a longer discussion around how important privacy is to security, legal in the future. Also, identity and access management, especially now due to the pandemic, is become more critical as people are no longer in the office. Ideal would be a very well-defined zero trust network. This helps you immensely to make sure that your third parties have access to the right environments. Keep up to date your access management processes and technology. Validate, make sure you do regular account attestation, who should have access to what, depending on the criticality of the application. It can be yearly, quarterly, every 6 months. Look at having tooling that third-party staff can use in your environment, but they actually don't have access to it, and use strategic partners. I believe strategic partners, if done correctly and done well, will reduce a lot of your third-party and fourth-party risk, and also our partners, and work clearly and closely with you. Thank you very much for your time, and let's see what questions you have.